the last son of the gods, cursed with immortality, hunted by the very heavens that birthed him. This is Kallion's story. They called him Kallion, the last son of the great warrior Nithros. Born of gods, raised among men, he was a child of both worlds, and now belonged to none. He wasn't like others. His blood burned with power. His skin never aged. His eyes had seen the rise and fall of kings, the burning of skies, the weeping of mountains. But more than anything, his heart carried pain, a pain older than time itself. Long ago, before the world had names for the stars, there was a war. Not between men, but between the immortals, gods who had ruled the skies and shaped the earth with their breath. It was a war that lasted 14 centuries, and it tore everything apart. Thunder split the clouds for days without end. Oceans rose like monsters. Mountains crumbled into dust. And in the middle of that chaos stood Nithros, father of Kallion, sword in one hand, his 2 elder sons at his side. They fought like legends. They died like legends. Kallion never forgot the day they were taken from him. He was just a boy then, if you could call a demigod a boy, watching from a cliff as the sky burned gold, then red, then black. His father vanished into that firestorm. His brothers, swallowed by shadows that screamed. Only silence followed, and Kallion never heard their voices again. Years passed. Hundreds. Maybe more. Kallion stopped counting. He walked through cities built on the bones of those who once worshipped the gods. He slept under trees that had learned to grow through the ruins of temples. He watched entire kingdoms rise, shine brightly, and vanish like smoke. But he never changed. His hair stayed dark. His body stayed strong. His face, untouched by time. No wrinkles. No weakness. Just the same eyes. Haunted, hollow, and old beyond imagination. He tried to die. Oh, how he tried. Once, he stood on the highest peak in the north, where even the wind screamed. He threw himself off the edge. The fall should have shattered his bones. Instead, he woke the next day with not a scratch. Another time, he drank poison that had killed 100 men. It slid down his throat like water. His heart never slowed. He even begged a god, one of the few left hiding in forgotten corners of the world, to take his life. The god only laughed, his voice echoing like thunder. You carry a curse, son of Nithros, a gift twisted by pain. You will walk the world until it forgets your name. And so he walked. He wore 1,000 faces, soldier, wanderer, builder, thief. In one lifetime, he helped raise a village from mud. In another, he burned an empire to the ground. None of it changed the emptiness inside him. One night, in a forgotten forest where even birds no longer sang, Kallion sat by a dying fire. He didn't move. He just stared into the flames, watching them flicker like the final breath of a story no one would ever tell. Suddenly, he heard a sound behind him, a soft crunch of leaves. Slow. Careful. He didn't turn. Who's there? He asked, his voice quiet but sharp, like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. No answer. Then a whisper came, not from a person, but from the trees themselves. A voice like wind and memory. The bloodline is not yet finished. Kallion stood up. Slowly, his hand went to the hilt of his blade, not out of fear, but instinct. The voice chilled him in a way even death never had. You must return, Kallion. The gods are not gone, and the war is not over. His heart pounded, something it hadn't done in centuries. He looked around, but the forest was still. The fire had gone out. Even the stars above seemed to hold their breath. Kallion knew what this meant. The past wasn't done with him. And somewhere in the dark, something ancient had awakened. Long before men could speak, before fire was known, before the stars had names, there was only the architect. No one knows what the architect looked like. Some say he was a light brighter than suns. Others believe he was a voice that never stopped singing. But one thing is sure, he was the first, and he was alone. So, from the stillness of the void, the architect created life. Not men, not animals, gods. The first generation. They were called the primordials. They were not shaped like anything we know. Some were made of storm clouds. Others had burning rivers flowing through their bodies. One had eyes all over his back. Another had wings so wide they could cover mountains and turn day into night. Each of them had a gift, a power so strong it could shape planets. One primordial whispered, and the oceans were born. Another clapped, and the sky cracked open into stars. They were the first law of the world. But even their greatness had limits. The architect, watching from beyond, saw that creation needed guidance, not just power. So he breathed again, and the second generation was born. They were called the Lotharion. They were smaller than the primordials, but still mighty, tall, glowing beings made of silver light and golden flame. They walked like kings. Their voices calmed storms. Their words carried truth that could not be broken. They didn't create. They kept balance. They wrote the golden laws across the sky with fire and starlight. They judged fairly. They punished the wicked. They protected the weak. But time still moved. The world still spun. And even justice needed rhythm. So came the third breath of the architect. And with it, the third generation. They were called the Ethera. They were all female, graceful as falling snow, and powerful in quiet ways. They could touch a leaf and make spring bloom. They could blink and turn night into day. Their voices were soft, but every time they sang, time itself obeyed. They didn't judge. They didn't rule. They brought harmony. They were the seasons, the winds, the heartbeat of the world. Where the Lotharion were law, the Ethera were feeling. One brought order. The other brought soul. The world was nearly complete. But there was one breath left. And it was the softest of all. The fourth generation. They were called the Mortari. They looked like humans. They were humans, almost. They were born with more humility than power. Their hands were made not to strike like gods, but to build, to dig, to shape, to plant, to care. They couldn't fly. They couldn't command the stars. But they could dream. They could love deeply, fight bravely, and create things the gods never imagined. Music, stories, kingdoms. They were gifted with invention, willpower, and the ability to endure. The older generations looked down on them at first. The primordials saw them as weak. The Lotharion called them unfinished. The Ethera wept for how fragile they were. But the architect smiled, for he had saved his most mysterious creation for last. And from the Mortari came many tribes, many bloodlines. But one stood out, the house of Nithros, the bloodline of Kallion. Their line carried a rare fire, not just strength of body, but strength of soul. They had the blood of primordials in their veins, but also the heart of mortals. They loved fiercely, fought without fear. They obeyed the gods, but never blindly. They asked questions no others dared ask, and that made them dangerous. Kallion was the last of them now, the last spark of a once great fire. He walked the earth alone, but the memories of all 4 generations burned inside him. He had stood before the silver gaze of a Lotharion judge. He had danced with an Ethera under falling stars. He had even touched the bones of a sleeping primordial buried beneath a desert no one remembered. He knew the truth the world had forgotten. The gods were not gone. They were only sleeping. And when they wake, everything will change. That night, under a sky with no moon, Kallion knelt beside an old stone altar, one carved long ago by his ancestors. He placed his hand on it. The stone was cold, but deep beneath it, something stirred. Before the war, before the silence of gods, there was a time when the world breathed as one. A time of peace, a time of balance, a time Kallion would never forget. He was just a child when he was taken to the quiet village of Orthian, a place hidden deep between green hills and golden fields. There were no walls, no soldiers, no fear. Just laughter, warm food, and voices singing around evening fires. It was a village untouched by war. And there, among the simple folk of Orthian, lived Eliron, Kallion's grandfather. But Eliron was no ordinary man. He was the 12th speaker of the Mortari, a wise elder who once stood among the gods in the celestial assembly, where stars moved when he spoke and rivers paused to listen. To the world, he was legend. To Kallion, he was just grandfather. Eliron raised him with strong hands and a gentle heart. He didn't teach Kallion how to fight. He taught him how to grow, how to hold soil in his fingers and feel its mood, how to plant a seed not with force, but with care, how to wait, how to trust that even the smallest seed, with patience, could become something mighty. This is our strength, Kallion, Eliron once said, crouching beside a row of new sprouts. Not in battle, not in blood, but in peace, in knowing when not to fight. At night, they would sit under the stars, and Eliron would tell stories of the primordials who roared during storms but wept quietly in lonely mountains, of the Lotharion who could split a lie in half just by listening. Of the Ethera, who danced between clouds and whispered the seasons into motion. And of the Mortari, the humblest of all, who were born not to command, but to understand. Every being has a song, my child, Elrond would say, placing a hand over Kallion's chest. Even the gods. But our song is the softest, and that is why it lasts the longest. For many centuries, harmony ruled the realms. Each generation, primordials, Lotharan, Ethera, Mortari, knew their place and honored one another. The seven elders of the primordials, great and ancient beings of fire, stone, and wind, watched over all from their shining halls above the clouds. They did not rule with fear. They guided with wisdom. Whenever there was conflict between the generations, the elders would gather beneath the star dome, a sacred chamber where all light bent and bowed, and listen. No voice was ignored, not even the voice of a child. The balance was delicate, but it held. The Mortari did not rise by sword. They rose through purpose. They built homes with care. They wrote books that sang with truth. They painted stories on cave walls that even the gods stopped to admire. They learned the names of every tree, every stone, every creature that walked the earth. They did not rule. They served. And in doing so, they became respected by all. Kallion grew in that peace. He learned to speak the sky tongue, a language only gods and stars understood. He learned how to listen to the land, to tell when a tree was grieving or when the wind carried a warning. But most importantly, he learned never to fear the divine. Even gods can bleed. Elrond once said, his voice quiet. But only the brave know how to look them in the eye and still be kind. And then, something changed. It started with a silence in the forest. Birds stopped singing. Then came the crack in the sun, a strange line of shadow that never moved. One night, Kallion woke from a dream. He had seen a mountain fall, swallowed by black fire. A voice, not his own, echoed through his bones. The harmony is breaking. He rushed to Elrond's hut, breathless. The old man was already waiting, staring into the sky. It has begun, Elrond said, not turning. What has? Kallion asked, shaking. Elrond closed his eyes. The gods are stirring, and they no longer agree. Far above the world, in the halls of the primordials, a great argument had begun. And below, in the heart of a young demigod, a storm had awakened. For centuries, the world moved in perfect rhythm. The gods watched. The seasons danced. The Mortari lived with purpose, and peace held strong. But peace is a fragile thing, and even gods can fall. It began with silence. Not the peaceful kind found in quiet forests, but a cold silence. The kind that creeps in like fog, slow, thick, and heavy with dread. The primordials, the first and oldest of all beings, had changed. Once, they had watched over the world like caring giants. Now, they turned inward, blinded by pride, deaf to the cries beneath them. They stopped watching the stars. They stopped answering prayers. They forgot the world they once shaped with love. Instead, they whispered only to themselves, argued in secret halls of light, clutched their power like a crown that no one else could touch. And while they looked away, darkness came. From beyond the known skies, from a place where even time was afraid to go, came the realm of Exaker, a world of shadows, teeth, and hunger. They didn't speak. They didn't ask. They invaded. Through cracks in the sky, they poured in, creatures made of night, with no faces, only mouths. They swept over valleys and forests like a storm that could not be stopped. The Mortari cried out for help. The Ethera wept, their powers fading like winter winds. But the primordials did nothing. They sat high in their cloud palaces, watching with cold eyes. They called it a necessary trial. They said the world would adapt. But the Lotharion, the golden enforcers of law, did not agree. It was the youngest of them, Thander, who stood first. He looked upon the burning fields of earth, the dying children of the Mortari, and the Ethera collapsing under dark skies. And he could not stay silent. Enough, Thander roared, his silver eyes burning. If the firstborn will not protect their creation, we will. And for the first time in all history, a god defied a god. The Lotharion, once loyal servants of the primordials, turned their backs. Their blades, once used to uphold peace, now cut through shadow. They fought the creatures of Exaker with light so bright, it scorched the heavens. And they won. But the battle left something behind. A question. A quiet voice that would not go away. Why do we need the primordials if we are strong enough without them? That question became a thought. That thought became a whisper. That whisper became a spark. And that spark lit a fire that would burn through the heavens. The primordials, insulted by the defiance, thundered across the skies. "You forget your place," they cried. But the Lotharion did not kneel. "Not this time." "No," they answered. "We have remembered it." And with those words, the skies shattered. The war of the immortals had begun. It was not a war of swords alone, but of belief, pride, and betrayal. The world that once stood in harmony now trembled under the weight of gods fighting gods. Lightning screamed across the sky. Mountains bled fire. Oceans swallowed cities whole. And in the middle of it all, the Mortari, small and mortal, stood helpless. Except for one, Kallion, hidden in the ashes of his quiet village. With nothing left but memories and rage. He watched the gods destroy the world he loved. And deep within him, something began to rise. Something neither mortal nor god. It was not a battle for land, not for power, not even for revenge. It was a battle for the right to shape the cosmos. The primordials, proud and ancient, believed they alone could rule creation. The Lotharion, once their loyal enforcers, now believed the time of the old gods had passed. And so they clashed. The skies were the first to break. What began as a whisper of lightning turned into a roar that shattered clouds. Fire and wind crashed into each other like wild beasts. Whole stars were pulled from the heavens and thrown to the ground like stones. Oceans boiled. Mountains screamed. The moon cracked. And the sun disappeared. For the first time since the world was born, there was no light. Just endless night. And so began the era the mortals would later call the Night Eternal. The war lasted 14 centuries. 14 centuries of fire and blood. 14 centuries of gods tearing the world apart, piece by piece. No corner of the earth was untouched. The Ethera, torn between loyalty and survival, split in half. Some followed the Lotharion, hoping for change. Others stayed with the primordials, clinging to the old ways. The Mortari, weakest in body but strong in spirit, were caught in the middle. Friend turned against friend. Fathers against sons. Sisters against their own blood. And the beautiful cities they had built together burned. The golden empire of Elisar, where Skybridge's connected towers of light, was reduced to dust. The silver halls of Sundarian, carved into the cliffs by the Ethera and lit by stars, collapsed into the sea. Even the forests of Alindra, where the trees once sang, were silenced. Everything that had been made in peace was now erased in war. And in that chaos, Kallion lost everything. He watched as Orthian, his home, his peace, his past, was swallowed by shadow. He saw his grandfather Eliron, once the wisest speaker of the Mortari, fall beneath the thunder of a Lotharian's wrath, not because he fought, but because he refused to. "We are not made to choose sides," Eliron had said. "We are made to heal them." But there was no healing left in the world. Only flames. Kallion searched for answers. He wandered through the ruins of burned temples, through frost-covered deserts, through cities buried in ash. He heard whispers of fallen gods and saw stars blink out one by one. He saw children born in war, never knowing peace. He saw beasts twisted by rage, roaming free. He saw mortals pretending to be gods, and gods crumbling into dust. He walked through it all untouched, because he could not die, and that, he realized, was his curse. To survive while everything he loved was destroyed. One day, deep in the heart of a dead forest, Kallion found a mirror, a relic left by the Ethera. It was cracked, faded, but it still held magic. When he looked into it, he did not see his reflection. He saw flashes of the war, gods screaming, mountains bleeding, the stars flickering like dying embers. And behind it all, a shadow, not a god, not a man, something else, something that watched the war and smiled. "This war was never ours," Kallion whispered, stepping back. "It was planted. But who? And why? And what role did he still have to play?" As he walked away from the mirror, the skies above cracked again. But this time, it was different. The light that poured through wasn't fire. It was gold. Warm. New. A sign. The war was not over. But maybe, hope had returned. They took everything from him. Not in one day, but piece by piece. First his village, then his people, then his family. Each loss, like a flame snuffed out. Each death, another wound carved deep into his soul. Kallion had known pain, but never like this. The war had turned the world into ashes, but one name burned brighter than all others. Valtherin, a Lotharion warrior, once noble, now twisted by rage. Tall as towers, skin of silver, eyes like fire that never cooled. He had once stood for balance and justice. Now, he lived for one thing: destruction. It was Valtherin who led the attack on Orthian. It was Valtherin who threw Kallion's brother into the fire. It was Valtherin who brought Eliron, gentle elder, to his knees, then ended him without a word. Kallion saw it all, from the shadows. Too weak to fight, too late to save. He did not scream. He did not cry. He simply watched, and burned, not with flames, with vengeance. He disappeared after that day. Some thought he died. Others whispered he had gone mad. But Kallion had not died. He had begun to hunt. He crossed ruins swallowed by time, fought beasts born from war, slept beneath fallen temples, and awoke in the middle of storms. He ate when he had to. He bled when he must. But he never stopped. He followed every rumor, every whisper. He listened to madmen, bargained with ghosts, all to find one thing: Valtherin. And at last he did. In the deepest part of the world, far beyond the shores of men, past drowned kingdoms and sunken spires, Kallion stood at the edge of the world's final ocean. Beneath the waves lay the beast. Valtherin had hidden there, deep in the sea's belly, feeding on darkness, growing stronger. But Kallion did not fear him. Not anymore. To face him, Kallion needed more than rage. He needed power, the kind even the gods had forbidden. So he went to the cavern of Black Echo, a place where sound no longer existed, where the sea floor itself whispered in forgotten tongues. There, in silence, he drew blood from his hand. He traced ancient runes in the sand. He called on old names, names not spoken in over 1,000 years. The sea answered. It rose with violence. Lightning crashed without thunder. The waves split like a mouth opening wide. And out came Valtherin. The fight was unlike any other. Steel met silver. Light met shadow. Their battle shook the ocean floor and woke sleeping monsters. But in the end, Kallion won. He pinned Valtherin beneath a stone altar older than time itself. Using the last of the forbidden rites, he bound him, body and soul, chained to the seabed, cursed to drift forever in a prison of salt and silence. "You will not die," Kallion whispered. "You will stay here, drown 1,000 times, and remember my face." The ocean calmed. Valtherin was gone. Kallion had his vengeance. But vengeance has a price. The gods saw what he had done, and they did not celebrate. They did not praise. They were angry, for Kallion had used powers meant only for gods. He had crossed lines drawn in the sky. He had spilled sacred blood, and for that, they punished him. One night, as he slept on the shore, dreaming of peace at last, a voice came to him, cold, hollow, eternal. "You defied us, son of Nithros, and so you shall pay." When Kallion awoke, his wounds were gone. His scars had vanished. His face, unchanged. His hands, strong. He felt no hunger, no pain, no fear. Time had left him. Forever. He ran through 10 winters. He stood beneath falling stars. He threw himself from cliffs. He begged for death, but it never came. He could not age. He could not die. He could only remember. Immortal. Alone. Cursed. Not by chains, but by the very gods he once trusted. And somewhere, deep beneath the sea, Valtherin waited. Still bound. Still watching. Still whispering. The war ended not with a bang, but with silence. A silence so deep, the stars themselves seemed afraid to breathe. The sky, once filled with fire and fury, was now cold and empty. Oceans, once boiling with the rage of gods, had turned still. Mountains no longer bled. Cities once alive with light now lay buried beneath rubble and regret. The world had been broken, not just its land, but its soul. In the ruins of the last battlefield, a figure knelt. Tall, proud, now defeated. It was Miradon, first elder of the primordials, the most ancient, the most feared. He pressed his forehead to the scorched earth, his silver hair matted with ash, and whispered a name. Architect. And the architect came. No footsteps, no trumpet, no light. He simply was. The one who had crafted existence itself. The one who had formed the stars with a single thought. The one who had breathed life into the first generation and carved the laws of heaven into stone. The gods trembled. Even Miradon, who had once moved suns with a gesture, could not look upon him. "You were my first," the architect said, voice echoing like thunder hidden behind a curtain. "I gave you form. I gave you purpose. And what did you make of it?" His words were soft, but each syllable cracked the sky. "You made war. You made ruin. You broke the balance." No god dared speak. The Lotharions stood in shame, their armor cracked and stained with the blood of their creators. The Ethera, those who had survived, hid behind broken time. And the Mortari, they simply knelt, scattered across the war-torn world, holding their dead and praying to a sky that no longer listened. The architect raised his hand, and judgment began. First, he turned to the primordials. "You were born from me, yet you turned on each other like wild beasts. For this, you shall leave this world." With a single gesture, he opened a great tear in the sky, an endless black void beyond stars. The primordials were pulled in, one by one, screaming, weeping, vanishing. Not killed, but exiled. Forever. Then, he looked at the Lotharion. "You were meant to guard the law. Instead, you chased power. So now, I take it back." Their glowing weapons shattered. Their wings turned to dust. And they, too, were cast into the void. Only silence remained. Next, the Ethera, the weavers of time and season. Your beauty, your rhythm, became weapons. You turned love into poison. You shattered harmony. And so, the architect shattered them. But not into death. He scattered them like wind, pieces of themselves lost in time. Some would become echoes and myths. Others would awaken in future lives, not knowing who they truly were. But never again would they be whole. Then came the Mortari, Kallion's kind, the youngest, the humblest, the most mortal. They had not started the war, but they had bled in it. They had built empires, and lost them. They had loved, and buried that love beneath stone. They had suffered the most. The architect looked upon them with eyes not of fire, but sorrow. "You were my last hope," he whispered, "the bridge between the divine and the living. But even you were broken." He did not destroy them. He did not cast them into the void. But he took something from them. Their unity, their legacy. "You shall walk this earth as strangers. You will build, and you will fall. You will remember fragments, but never the whole. You will seek each other, but never reunite." And thus, the Mortari became lost. Some became sages, others kings, others slaves, but none ever found the others again. The architect's work was not yet done. From the ashes of all that had been, he reached into the dust and shaped something new. Something small, fragile, human. They had no wings, no godblood, no light of divinity. But they had will. They had hunger. They had hearts that refused to give up. And the architect gave them earth. All of it. "Let them rule now," he declared. "Let them try what the gods could not." And so, the old gods faded. The war was erased from books and memories. But not from Kallion. He remained, cursed, ageless, remembering everything. He watched the rise of man with quiet eyes. He walked among them like a ghost. And deep within him, a question grew louder with each passing century. Why did he leave me? Kallion was not a god, not a man, not a monster, just a memory that refused to die. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of time, the architect watched and waited, because the story of gods was not over. It had only begun. Kallion has walked ever since, day after day, year after year, century after century. He does not sleep long. He does not speak much. He simply walks. He walks through forests where no birds sing, through deserts where the wind tells stories older than stone, through cities of men, men who do not know his name, do not see the weight he carries, do not care. To them, he is just a traveler, a quiet man with eyes that have seen too much. But if they looked close, if they truly looked, they would see something strange. He does not age. He does not grow tired. And sometimes, when lightning splits the sky, his shadow disappears. He has no wings, no crown, no fire in his hands like the gods before him. But deep inside, buried beneath silence and sorrow, Kallion holds something far more powerful. Memory. He remembers the golden cities of the Ethera, floating in the skies. He remembers the songs sung by the Lotharion in their crystal towers. He remembers the war, the fire, the screams, the moment his brother was thrown into the flames. He remembers standing in the shadows, helpless, heartbreaking. And he remembers the face of Valtherin. Sometimes, Kallion finds himself staring into the sea. He doesn't speak. He doesn't blink. He just stares, as if listening, as if waiting. Because beneath those dark waves, Valtherin is still there, still bound, still whispering. There are nights when Kallion dreams. Dreams of the past. Dreams of his family laughing beside a fire. Dreams of his mother's voice humming a lullaby he hasn't heard in 1,000 years. He always wakes before the song ends. And when he opens his eyes, he is alone again. He has seen kingdoms rise. He has watched them fall. He has seen men crown themselves gods, only to be buried by time. He once sat in a village square and watched a little girl feed birds. She smiled at him, and for a moment, he forgot the curse. He forgot the silence. He almost believed he could live again. But then the wind shifted. He heard the whisper in the breeze. "You cannot stay." And he stood up and walked away. Again, in the cold mountains of the north, he once found a ruined temple. Inside, carvings lined the walls, images of the old gods. His family, his people. He placed his hand on the stone and felt warmth, like a heartbeat long forgotten. He stayed there for days, not speaking, not moving, just remembering. Then the snow fell, and he walked on. He has walked through plagues, through wars, through times when the stars themselves seemed to fall. He does not fear death. He wants it, but death does not want him. He has thrown himself into fire. He has leapt from cliffs into the sea. He has begged the sky to take him. But still he lives. Still he remembers. Some call him a ghost. Some say he is a myth. Some have written his face in old books, calling him the Watcher, the Gray Stranger, the man who does not die. But he does not correct them. He just watches from the distance and walks on. And so he wanders, across lands where no gods walk, across a world that forgot its makers. He does not seek glory. He does not seek love. He only seeks one thing: peace. But peace does not come, because the past still lives inside him, because something stirs beneath the ocean, because the architect is still watching, and because the story of Kallion is not over. Not yet. Folded hands, thanks for watching this powerful story. If it moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone, and subscribe for more stories that inspire,